Okay, folks, here we are in with episode 19 of the Silly Goose Gang podcast. And joining us tonight, we have Robin Dreeke, the former head of the FBI Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program. Robin, welcome along to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. As we were chatting beforehand, I'm excited to be here just so I can listen to you all talk because I sound so much boring compared to you all.
We just think we've decided, me and Chris have decided that 2020 is definitely broken because the amount of people that have been willing to come on and talk to two daft Scottish guys on our podcast has completely blown our mind. And when I've been telling people who we had on tonight, they were like, how did you manage that? And I was a little bit, because obviously your specialisation is kind of prediction of human behaviour. And I've genuinely decided that I always put in any invite when I'm sending it out, particularly to people that are non-Scottish. I always say, if you fancy jumping on with two Scottish guys, because I'm hoping that's the hook. Because I would imagine someone like yourself, you must get asked on podcasts all the time.
Sure.
And it tends to probably be fellow Americans like yourself talking about things. And me and Chris were saying we genuinely aren't sure if there's anyone from Scotland doing these kind of podcasts.
No.
And we were like, you know what, let's go for it. Two Scottish guys. It's a little bit different. And the amount of people that have said yes, me and Chris sometimes just sit and laugh. And you were definitely, in the nicest way, you were one of these ones that I burst out laughing when you agreed. Just
because it worked.
Yeah, but as much as it just seems so ridiculous that, like, me and Chris, two daft lads from Scotland, are currently sitting talking to the former head of the FBI Counterintelligence Analysis Program.
So, but you did the greatest thing, because again, I love human behavior. I love analyzing, and I love trying to figure out why on things. And you used a great, like you said, you used a great hook. Two Scottish guys, and your podcast name, the Silly Goose, podcast. I was like, that's crazy. That's awesome. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Because especially right now, what a serious world. It's so important. The most important thing for health right now is get out and get vitamin D by being in sunshine and laughter. Have levity in your life, have the ability to laugh yourself, have the ability to laugh with others, whether you can do it in person or remotely. I've been looking forward to this all day. I mean, and actually, since you've reached out, I apologize for my delay in getting back to you. I'm lazy. I don't respond as fast as I should to emails sometimes.
That's hilarious. So there's two things in there that are hilarious. Number one, we don't get a lot of vitamin D in Scotland. That doesn't happen enough. That doesn't happen a whole heap. And number two, you've been looking forward to this. It just seems ridiculous. It's so silly. But,
why not?
Yeah. Well, like you say, the world's extremely serious at the minute, and the whole point of doing this with Ali was, let's have some fun. Let's use our time creatively during lockdown. And it's so what you were saying before we started about being in the FBI and stuff. One thing that we've talked to quite a few academics and stuff now, I've got another few lined up, is that they're all human beings. So you might be slightly intimidated because, we were speaking to a professor on Tuesday night, and you're a little intimidated, when you're going to speak to somebody from the FBI, you go, God almighty. Then you open up and you go, oh, he's just a guy. He's just a person.
Just
like
a
me.
Human being. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, it's like, especially with my back, it's so funny because people say, well, how did you get to run be the chief of the behavioral analysis program for counterintelligence at the FBI? I said, it's easy. I failed at everything else in life. I mean, it's literally just a job. My job is recruiting spies. Other people's job is to sell something. Everyone is literally so equal in life. We have, and this is what makes human beings very predictable. We all are seeking safety, security, and prosperity for ourselves and our loved ones. And we're all acting in our own best interest in terms of those things. And if you take the time to slow down, shut up, and pay attention to someone else as what they think is in their best interest, you now know what they're going to do. And if you have resources for them in terms of those things, you're going to have a relationship. So it really is, life is, I talk to my son a lot. I have two kids, they're both pretty grown-ish. And when I talk to this with my son, he's like, oh man, it's like the Matrix. I stop seeing the images. I start seeing the code behind everything, because when you start understanding human beings and really how we're hardwired, it's very, very easy to predict what each of us are going to do on any given day. And it's not negative either. It's very, very positive because, yeah, and that's, and just talking about the riots, in the United States right now, without actually talking politics or anything behind it, it's a majority of human beings, a high majority, like safety, security, and prosperity, and they want to feel safe, and they want to be, so anytime negative things happen during riots anywhere in the world, it's usually pretty short-lived because people do not like being uncomfortable very much at all. And they're going to get away from that as fast as possible. People want to feel heard, and they want to be validated for their thoughts, emotions, and feelings. But at the end of the day, they want to feel safe, and they do not like being uncomfortable. And things that are uncomfortable do end pretty rapidly over, a couple days, weeks at most. So that's my message to everyone right now, is just calm down, take deep breaths, listen to people, understand each other, and be patient. It'll go away.
Yeah, I suppose it's true, isn't it? And I know we found it over the last few years in Britain, particularly with, the Brexit, the Scottish independence. Right. Everything becomes very, very heated and very, I suppose the word I would use is tribal. People gather into their own tribes of, if you're not with me, you're automatically against me. Right. And one of the things that me and Chris have talked about is ideally reaching that, because there's always a bit of common ground. Me and Chris are friends, but there's a lot of things we disagree on, politically and other things. But there's enough stuff in the middle that, okay, you've got your belief over here, I've got my belief over there. But in the middle, we've, as we've said, we've made a podcast called the Silly Goose Gang. We can always reach that common ground of having a laugh and the human side of it, away from the tribalism of this is my stand here and that's your stand over there, and keep that distance between them.
Yeah, so what I imagine you all do very well with each other is, I have these 4 core things and kind of themes you build into everything you say and do in life, because these 4 things that each human being is seeking and craving. We are genetically and biologically coded to want to feel affiliated with meaningful groups and organizations and be valued by the same. And so the way you demonstrate that value and the way you demonstrate affiliation to others is, because again, that's the elusive obvious. This is what leadership is all about. This is where, I failed in the Marine Corps as a leader, as a young leader, because I sucked. I was ranked last. I'm asking my mentors and guides, what do I need to do? And he goes, you just need to be a better leader. And it's like, well, how the hell do you do that? And this is it. If you do one of these 4 things, and so reflect for yourself as you're listening, I guarantee you're doing this for each other, regardless of your differences and opinions from time to time and everything. Number 1, you're seeking each other's thoughts and opinions, because you only seek the thoughts and opinions of people that you want to affiliate with and you value. Second, you talk in terms of the other person's priorities, their needs, wants, dreams, and aspirations, and how they view prosperity from their point of view. Because if you're not talking in terms of the priorities of others, you're wasting your breath, because human beings, we want to talk in terms of things that are important to us. 3, you validate each other without judging each other. So this is really key and critical. So you can really differ on your thoughts and opinions on things, but when you validate someone, it means you're seeking to understand why they have a different point of view without judging it. Now, you can banter back and forth and you can disagree, but the fact that you're seeking and you're curious about each other without judging each other, both verbally and non-verbally, demonstrates that, hey, I understand you, because human beings don't necessarily need you to agree with them. They just want to feel heard and understood. And nothing's better exemplified right now than all the protests in the United States right now is people just want to feel heard. And the ones that feel heard in the communities where the law enforcement is partnering with them and listening, there's no problems or issues because they're listening, they're validating. And finally, empower people with choices, because you only give people choices that you want to affiliate with and that you value. And so, so at the end of the day, here's our options, here's your choices. You empower them with, we can do A, B, or C. Meanwhile, you only offer people A, B, or C if A, B, and C is good for you as well. So if you include one of those 4 things in anything you say, anything you write, in anything you do, the entire conversation shifts from the focus on you to the focus on them. And ultimately, that's what each of us is seeking. We want the focus to be on us. And this is how you proactively do it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things I like is the sort of the need to belong. So we've often said this, like we said before, we both do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu together. So I don't think, I think these things to a large part, certainly in Scotland, I'm assuming worldwide, we they've sort of replaced the church. People, less tendency in Scotland. So people want to belong to something, and this is now their church. So whether it's CrossFit, or it's jiu-jitsu, or where you're playing,
I should hold up. I should hold up my CrossFit shirt. I'm a CrossFit guy.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
So but you're right, because churches, and that's what church is and religion is. It's community. All these things are community. And if you feel a sense of belonging and being valued in that community, it's amazing how far it'll take you. Especially, and so here's the key with it: if positive things happen in the community, in other words, your brain releases dopamine when positive things are happening. Because here's a comparison and contrast. So say you're part of a negative hate group. Granted, that's a community, and you have that sense of belonging, but the challenge with hate groups, and this is why they don't flourish more than they are, and this is why they keep falling apart, and that's why it's right now they'll keep falling apart, because nothing else positive is going on in the brain. Hate, resentment, discontentment, all the negative emotions do not do anything positive in the brain whatsoever. And so it's a negative loop. I mean, it falls away because there's no reason to want to keep doing that. The only thing they're able to get out of it is that sense of community. And if that sense of community starts dispersing because there's no positive feeling, which it inevitably always does, it disperses. That's why you can do things, like Australian Jiu-Jitsu, because I guarantee you, it's a great community. It's people that build each other up. You feel great. I see the smile on Ali's face when you just talk about it. It's like, it's positive emotions, positive energy, and that's what binds people together, no matter whether it's, Jiu-Jitsu or whether, it's being inside of organizations or CrossFit, and each boxing CrossFit's different. I'm a pilot, so it's a pilot community. So there's all these different little communities that make you feel welcomed and encouraged and valued. And that's what actually gets things moving in life.
Yeah, super. Yeah, it's a really cool. I know. I don't do. I might do CrossFit. I like to do a little bit of everything. So I might do some CrossFit at some point. I don't do a lot of Olympic lifting and stuff, but I've done some. I've done most years I'll do Murph. On American Memorial Day, I've done Murph.
The Murph, yeah.
Yeah, it's really
mine with my son. Yeah, it's a bone crusher.
Bloody awful, but it's a good one to do. But I like to see the community. There's a CrossFit club quite close to us, and they're always sharing pictures on Instagram and stuff, and it just looks, every time somebody gets a PB, they're all high-fiving and cuddling, and it's just cool. Yeah, it's a cool environment to be in. So what I mean, have you done any competitions with the CrossFit?
I just do the opens, and it's embarrassing. Okay. I got into CrossFit. I'm in my 50s, and so I'm the second oldest guy in my box. And during COVID, we did a lot of at-home stuff, and so I enjoy it. It's amazing that I was an endurance athlete for years, doing ultra marathons and stuff. And so kind of shifting as I got older and my body started breaking more and more. It's the same reason I know a lot why you do jiu-jitsu is because it's whole body. And same thing with CrossFit. And I didn't understand that at the beginning. And so when you start doing the Olympic lifting and you actually understand, wow, this is massive technique. And the thing I like about where I go is the coaching is phenomenal. I've never had better coaching in my entire life. And it's very personalized. They, just like anything in life, when they make it about you and they don't force you to be a 20-year-old like everyone else in there, and they, can accommodate, it's fantastic. And for the couple of years I've been doing it, not one injury. I'm dumbfounded by it because that's all I heard about before. Oh, you're going to get injured and blah, blah, blah. And no, I've never been in better shape my entire life. It's crazy. Because again, healthy environment, healthy people, and there you go.
Yeah, it's so true though. Talking about the jiu-jitsu that me and Chris go to, I've got children as well, Robin. I've got 2 teenage sons and a 10-year-old daughter. And my oldest son went through a really rough patch, as often happens when you're a teenager. Sure. And it was part of it was because he wasn't doing any real physical activity. Because he doesn't play football, soccer, which is the main sport kind of in Scotland pretty much. So because he didn't play soccer, there wasn't a huge amount of opportunities for him to do much else. And a couple of years ago, I was like, look, we need to get out of your brain a little bit, get back into your body. Right. And the guys have all been great, and I think it's been good for him as well. Talking about that community and those, the validation from it is seeing that none of the guys really treat me any different to anyone else.
Right.
He's part of the group. And it's definitely been good. And I know you were mentioning your son. Is that heard on a podcast? Is it the Naval Academy that your son's at?
Yeah, I graduated there. He's actually home right now. He goes back in another week or two because they got locked out for COVID. But yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. So when I went through the Naval Academy, the simple rule was you got to do a sport year round. I don't care what you do. They have intramurals. Again, it's for us. It's a Division I high level, athletic school. So yeah, and so. But if you can't do that level, you got to do a sport year round. And I did all these goofy things. I did ultimate frisbee. I did marathons. I did cycling. I mean, I did everything. I did a thing called field ball, which is very much like rugby. And so so that was the rule in our house growing up for both my kids, was that I don't care what you do, but you got to do a sport year round. And you're right, for that mental health of just being out, interacting with others. And I didn't care what you did. Like for years, they did swimming. Then my son and I did baseball together for years as my daughter stuck with swimming. And then we shifted with baseball to tennis. And both my kids wound up doing tennis. And being the type A the type of guy I was like, tennis? What the freaking hell is tennis? You can't do tennis. But then when I actually got into tennis, because my kids were in tennis, like, wow, this is really intense. This is really good. And I mean, their athleticism was fantastic. So that was. But you're right. When you keep your kids engaged, athletically, mentally, it's phenomenal for their well-being, because both my kids wound up doing they both achieved what exactly they wanted to do so far in life, which is a far cry different than most people, and definitely from me. So, yeah, and I think a large part of it was keeping them active and keeping them outside with the vitamin D.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'd like to ask you about your endurance stuff, Robin.
Sure.
Yeah, I've done some marathons, done some triathlons. So, one of the the Bigfoot 200 is one that I would love to do. I think that's Washington State. I think it's 200 miles over hills up there. That looks pretty cool. But what's your sort of biggest distance and favorite race over there?
Wow, it's been a number of years, because I started realizing my body started breaking down. So it's amazing what you can do in your early 40s. By the time you hit your 50s, it's all done. Although I'm starting to make a resurgence, we'll see. But anyway, I did a bunch of 50 milers. Was okay. My max. My wife did not let me do 100 milers, although I really wanted to. So I've done a couple called the Bull Run. Over here in Manassas, Virginia, the Bull Run 50. I've done the JFK, which actually started it in the United States, the JFK 50. I've done that twice. So all these things, like you're saying, they're through the mountains, they're on trails. And it was such an energizing experience, because, I'd been a marathon runner for years. And I remember, I was, I'm okay. I'm one of those guys that understands, I'm not, no matter how hard I try, you hit a certain level and you'll never get faster. And I got it. So I ran this great marathon one year. I was in my late 30s, and I think I ran like a 3:35, marathon, which is respectable, but still could not qualify for Boston at that rate. It was flat. It was cool. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I got to do something else. I've maxed out. I can't go any faster than that one. It was hurtful. It was painful. I injured myself multiple times along the way trying to go faster. I said, let me try this ultra thing. And what I found is, go slow, go long, and just keep moving. And it was a great time. And I'll tell you, the people on it are just phenomenal, because it's so encouraging, because it's not competition at that point anymore. It's actually just finish. And smaller numbers. And I remember the first one I did, it was the Bull Run 50. And I remember I'd been running about 6 or 7 hours. I hadn't seen anyone in about 2 hours between the aid stations. And I just started laughing. I'm in the middle of the woods. I hadn't seen anyone in 2 hours. I've been running for like 6 hours. I was like, this is the craziest, stupid thing I've ever done. But it was such a hoot.
That's I've done Mont Blanc marathon in Chamonix, in France in the Alps. So you don't run on Mont Blanc itself, but it's so cool because.
And I'm looking at you. It's like a tank moving through the woods. Look at you.
I'm not.
It's like a green beret going through the woods.
I am not built for. I am not built for running marathons, but I try anyway, because why not? But you're climbing hills, and there's all the locals out in these little tiny little villages in the bottom of the Alps, and they've all got their cowbells out, and you've got your name on your vest, and they're all shouting at you, and you're French and saying "Allez, allez!" That is so cool. It's so cool.
That is exactly the same. That's why I love, all these things are universal. That's exactly the same. They cheer your name as you're coming in. They throw all these food and whatever you need at you, and they cheer you when you leave, and you get another. Yeah, it's a good deal.
Super cool, man. I've got some pictures from the Chamonix Valley, and some of them don't look real. You're looking at you got Mont Blanc in the back, and it's all
right.
Just looks. It doesn't look real. It looks just so. It's if you ever get the chance to go and do Mont Blanc Marathon, I would highly recommend it. It's amazing. Such a cool place.
As long as I'm allowed to walk it.
I walked a lot, but it's such a cool experience and such a cool event. Yeah, it's really cool. So, So, Robin, how did this crazy run into the FBI? How does it happen?
That's a great question. It's like the coolest podcast I've been on because we haven't talked about anything except my hobbies so far. It's fantastic. So it like I said at the beginning, it kind of happened by not by design. It definitely was not designed. A lot of people come in the FBI because it's something that was their lifelong dream, everything they always wanted to do, and it wasn't for me. So literally, I had been in the Marine Corps for 5 years as a captain. So from the Naval Academy, I went in Marine Corps because you can go either Marine Corps or Navy. And I went Marine Corps, and I was at Parris Island, South Carolina. I was a series and company commander down there. I was in charge of the training at boot camp for the Marines, and as a captain. And in my job in the Marine Corps, they're about to transfer me to Okinawa. And my job in the Marine Corps was very limited in ranking up. So it was my options professionally were very, very limited. And my wife and I decided we wanted to have a family. We really didn't want to have a family inside the Marine Corps. And so she actually applied to the FBI before I did. It's like been her lifelong dream had been to go in the FBI. So we grew up together, and we didn't date or anything. We knew each other, same group of friends. And so we took an 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C., and we got a tour of the FBI headquarters back then. And so she got enamored with it. So she actually applied before I did. And then we had a recruiter come to Parris Island from the FBI and said, "Hey, we think Marine Corps officers make great FBI agents." And I said, "All right." I literally had no idea what it was about. And I had 2 questions. I said, "Does all my military time count towards my retirement?" And they said, "Yes." And so I had 9 years that counted towards my retirement. So that's good. And I said, "What's your retirement rate?" In other words, how many people stay to retirement? Because I figured that would demonstrate to me the health of the organization. And they said, basically 95 to 98% of the agents that come on board make it to retirement. I said, that's a high percentage, saying that they must like their job. So, all right, I'll apply. And from there, I got assigned to New York City. It was not where I wanted to go. And I got the privilege of working on a counterintelligence squad. I had no idea what counterintelligence was. And I got assigned to work the Russian military intelligence, which is called the GRU. And my main job was to recruit spies. And I was surrounded by phenomenally professional, awesome spy recruiters. And I really learned from them about how not to be a moron in my life anymore. So, and I got on a behavioral team in New York. To go over our behavioral team, went to Quantico to train. I mean, just all these events that happened because literally I realized early on I'm a complete narcissistic moron and I need to be like all these great people around me. And so I needed to codify what they were doing. And so that's why I write books and everything, because I create labels and meanings behind what awesome people are doing so I can repeat their behavior since I suck. So that's a really short version of how did you get to do that? Well, I just happened. And I got in the FBI before my wife did. She got pregnant, and there you go. I'll tell you, I tell this to her all the time. She would have made a much better FBI agent than I was. So, because she's always one watching these crime dramas on TV and everything. They drive me up a wall. I can't stand them.
I was going to say it must be a bit like as we would call it, a busman's holiday. Where you're sat watching, a program where there's FBI agents. You must sit there cringing, thinking, "That's not how they do that. That's not how that."
So, and the reason it is
in under 52 minutes. Come on here, let's be serious.
Yeah, I know, and especially working counterintelligence, our operations go for years. I mean, we're talking years. There was stuff I was doing, and you can actually read about them in my books. Literally, that lasted my 21-year career. From the day I started to the day I ended, they were still going. Some of them. And what's funny, so I recently started watching the show on Netflix called The Americans. It's about the Russian illegals in the United States during the 60s. And because I was involved in one of the, in a case in the United States, it had the 10 Russian illegals. One of them was Anna Chapman, that got kind of famous because she was a good-looking, model-looking, Russian illegal. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching this on TV, on the Netflix thing, because everyone's, oh, it's pretty accurate, it's pretty good. And yeah, about 5% of it is accurate, and then it goes sideways so fast. It's just like, gosh, dang, it just really ruins it. It's good entertainment, though. It's good entertainment, though. I don't poo-poo any of it. It's just always realize it's entertainment and not real.
Yeah, but then if you had to have a documentary that covered a 21-year program, it probably wouldn't be great viewing.
Yeah, you got to condense it. You got to condense. You got to make it so it's exciting, because people say, "Oh, tell me what's a day in the life of the FBI agent." I said, well, go into the most boring office building you can find and sit behind a desk in a cubicle. There you go. That's pretty much it. My job was to not do that every day. It was, my job was, finding people that had information that could protect national security. And so that stuff's not in the office. You go meet people, you create relationships. And my product I sold was patriotism. So I'm selling a concept, selling an idea, and the only remuneration you get for it is a feeling of goodwill. So it's a tough product to sell, but if you're great at sales and you create great relationships and you build trust and you don't use deception or manipulation or anything like that, you can do a lot of good, and you can only save the world one person at a time. So I always focused on that.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to, exactly what you're saying there, just going back to, you listen to, I've listened to Mike Baker before on podcasts, an FBI guy, and you listen to him, and you go, oh, he's just a man. He's just a normal human, he's just a guy like me. You speak, before coming on here, you're thinking, God, I've got to speak to this FBI guy now, and he's going to be really intelligent, and he's going to be quite intense, I would imagine. And no, he likes CrossFit and runs marathons, and didn't really want to be in the FBI.
Yeah, my hobbies are camping. I walk every day. I just, my main hobby is my kids. My daughter is now a nurse. She graduated from university, and my son is in his junior year at the Naval Academy. Literally my hobby is my family, which is my life. Everything else, I love stuff like this. Because this gets the word out. Like my passion in life is for a long time has been, all right, so how can I be a resource for people to learn how to communicate the way they want to communicate? Because people want to make great connections with human beings, and I had to do it at a very high level, and I sucked at it really bad when I started. I was surrounded by people that understood. They didn't know what they were doing. They're naturally born doing it very well. That's why half the world is natural born leaders, and the other half isn't. My job as the non-natural born leader was to figure out what these other guys are doing, codify it so I could repeat it and also pass it along. And so that's when my great joy is like, most human beings want to communicate effectively. They want to communicate well. They want to build great trust. They want to build great relationships, and they don't want to be taken advantage of. And so that's what that's what I love doing. I love sitting back, watching, and helping others understand, all right, this is why you're awesome, because you're doing this, this, and this, like we did with you too. It's like, I guarantee you those 4 things we talked about, you do that in your communication with each other. I guarantee it. You don't see this kind of relationship between people that aren't doing that. And at the same time, you can think of times when, you probably didn't get along, or there was some stress there with either with each other or with others. I can guarantee you those things weren't going on. You're judging someone else. You were, either not verbally or non-verbally. You sat in judgment of them. Their shields go up. You weren't seeking their thoughts and opinions. You're trying to dominate their thoughts and opinions with yours. And there you go. I mean, it's pretty predictable behavior.
Yeah, as part of one of the reasons I reached out to yourself, Robin, is I've got 2 year books sat on my Kindle that I've been reading through.
Thanks.
Code of Trust and sizing people up or sizing up. Apologies.
Yeah, sizing people up. Yep.
Sizing people up. I was right. Because in my day-to-day job, I train new staff and existing staff for a financial services company.
Yep.
So one of the things I have to do very quickly is build rapport, build trust, get them on board with what we're going to do, and also recognise when people are saying, yeah, I'm all good, I'm all okay. Actually, no, you're not. And we do a lot of stuff in work about like neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and looking for body language clusters. And because one of the classic ones everyone says, I'm sure you're aware, if you fold your arms, that's really defensive. Well, actually, Chris is there was
excuse me.
Exactly.
It's one tail out of a cluster.
Yeah, it's all about clusters. So it might be, because in Scotland, and I know Chris does it all the time, but in Scotland, when we're little kids, we get told to sit with our arms folded by teachers, by parents. It's quite a Scottish thing. I don't know how it translates to America, but we get told as very little kids, sit with your arms folded, sit with your legs crossed, and that's how you sit when you're kind of behaving and paying attention in school. Sometimes you fold your arms because you're cold.
Right. It's a comfort move.
Yeah, just by itself doesn't mean anything, but if they're folding and their body's slightly turned away and they're frowning and there's a few other things going on, then you might say, okay, now they're starting to look a little bit more defensive about that situation rather than just fold my arms while I have a think here. Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's what I find interesting about your book, is talking about, the 6 signs for the behaviour prediction and how that's all going to tie into the real world of my job, not being an FBI agent very much so.
But and you're hitting on it so perfectly. When I started my career, with my behavioral team, a guy by the name, world-renowned nonverbal expert Joe Navarro, wrote the book What Everybody Is Saying. I mean, he is world-renowned nonverbal expert, good, very, very good close friend of mine, and that's his thing. His thing is nonverbals, and so was mine when I first started on the team, because he did a lot of interviews and interrogations, and so he had a need for that one skill set. Meanwhile, my career shifted towards not as much interviews and interrogations, but towards recruiting, human beings, which is it's different. You're looking at nonverbals, but it really required me to listen to words, and because words, it gave me a fuller picture. So what happened for me was I used to do the nonverbals, like you're saying, from the top of the head to the tips of the toes, and there's hundreds of things the body are saying. But what happens is, I haven't met a human being yet, and Joe will tell you the same thing, that has the ability to watch the nonverbals and listen to the words at the same time, because it's very, very difficult to pay attention to the linguistics that are being used, which are very important, because every time someone says something, they're sharing a priority. And remember, one of those 4 things I said is you need to talk in terms of the priorities of others. The only way you can do that is to hear what they're saying. And if you're trying to diagnose everything, what their body language is, then you're not going to hear the words as nearly as much. And the other challenge I'd say with watching nonverbals is, and people fall into this trap, if you're trying to detect deception, because a lot of people are trying to detect deception through nonverbals, what you're doing is, one, the best people in the world are only 50% accurate detecting deception through nonverbals alone. It's not accurate whatsoever, because stress is what you're looking for, and stress is a bad memory, a bad thought, but it also can be deception. And the other problem with it is, if you're looking for deception, you automatically give yourself a bias. So now all you're seeing is the deceptive indicators, which means you're going to miss all the non-deceptive indicators that are also going along. So the challenge with all this behavioralism is being objective and not trying to do anything, and just sitting back and observing as unbiasedly as humanly possible. And it's very, very challenging. And that's why I think the best counter to that, for any individual, be curious. Don't look for someone to be in right or wrong. As soon as you get rid of your opinion that there's a right or wrong or a good or a bad, there just is that person's is, and you are curious about how it is they came to that, how it is, who they, in other words, walk a mile in my shoes and see what decisions in life you would have made. Just have that curiosity, and that kind of helps shove that bias aside. So it is very challenging, but yeah, all those things you do. Matter of fact, it's funny when you mentioned, financial industry. That is my number one general client, is financial industry, because it's client relations, customer relations, because that's you're trying to bring that value to others. So absolutely.
What's interesting as well is, within where I train, is predominantly contact center based, so it is solely on the verbal. There is no non-verbal, because they're on the other side of a phone.
Yep.
So you're trying to teach staff to pick up on the verbal cues of how someone's saying, not so much what they're saying as how they're saying it.
Yep.
In amongst the story of, hi, how can I help you today? And the person goes, it's like 7 minutes of just talking, and you have to be able to recognize what are the key points in that 5 or 6 minute verbal diarrhea of just them spouting everything that's gone wrong that day. And amongst that, there's this problem with their account. And that's what you're trying to teach, and sometimes quite young people. The average age of the staff that I'm training is 17 to 23-year-olds.
Yeah.
That, with the greatest respect, don't have often a great amount of life experience.
Right.
we've got people that come in that don't know what a mortgage is because they're 17 years old, live at home, have no concept of what a mortgage is, and then someone's phoning up to say, the mortgage payment hasn't been made, and they're like, why are they getting really stressed about the mortgage payments? Well, because it keeps a roof over their head. So, and you're trying to put the emotions behind it, because I wouldn't go crazy about that. Yeah, but that's because you live at home and have no concept of paying bills and rent and food and all the other stuff that you kind of take for granted as older people like ourselves, as parents like myself and yourself, Robin. And it's interesting, having read your book, that I'm going to try and steer that differently over the next few months and see how it works.
And the greatest thing is, I love, any age is fantastic when you have humility, and so, so someone that, like you're saying, if you have a 18 or 23-year-old or something that says, I don't understand why this is stressing them out, but they're curious as to why it is, and they're not judging and they want to learn, I will take that human being any day of the week. I'm a big believer in, I can teach anyone to flip a switch. I can't teach humility, and I can't teach self-awareness. That's something that someone comes to on their own, in their own timing, but someone has enough of that to say, that can humble up and say, all right, I'm good at X, Y, and Z. I have energy. I can bring you energy, and I care deeply about your product and what we're doing. But here's what I suck at. I suck at experience. My son and I talk about this all the time. He's 20 years old, and I trust him with my life. He is the best researcher of anything, I literally would hand anything over to him to do. But what he doesn't have is life experience. And so the only thing I bring to the equation when we work on anything together is I got experience with people, experience with different tools, all these things. And so, and he respects that. So it's one of those things that, if people have the ability to understand, here's what I have, here's what I don't have, I rely on you for this. You can rely on me for this. And this is why, I've never met a human being once, and look back through history. No one had it all. We're all working on something. And so if you can recognize that and humble up with what you don't have, those are the people I want to work with, because they're the healthiest people out there.
Yes, no, it definitely makes it easier if they're willing to. Just to give there's still an example that sticks out, was we had an 18-year-old kid, let's say, in the group, and they were saying that we were talking about life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And they had no understanding of what it was, and they're like, so what's the point of it? And I was explaining, the concept of it, and they're like, so I have to be dead before it pays out? And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much how life insurance works. So what's the point then? Like, if I don't get the money, what's the point? And I was like, okay, yeah, I get it, because you're 18 years old, and but like,
you don't have anyone else, right?
I've got kids, so I want to make sure my mortgage is paid off, that my kids are well looked, all this stuff. Oh, so when do you get it? And I said, well, when you start paying for it. Oh my God, you have to pay for it as well.
So here's an easy concept. I always like going to the end goal of everything about why we do what we do, and that's why I love the finance industry. I think that's why I've done so much work with them, is because, I work with a lot of insurance companies as well, because what you all do is you're looking out for the safety, security, and prosperity for people if something catastrophic happens that they can't predict. And so a lot of times people have no idea about these types of things that can happen in their lives. And so what you're doing is you're helping them identify insecurities in their lives in terms of safety, security, and prosperity. Now you're offering resources for them in terms of those things. And so, so explain it to a 19-year-old is the same exact thing. All right, so every human being is very vested in safety and security and prosperity for yourself. This is one of those tools in order to give someone a sense of safety, security, and prosperity, for their family, their loved ones, so that's why, one size doesn't match all. It's like, hey, if you're 18 years old, you're not going to want, this massive plan that takes care of all your loved ones, because you don't have any, but you're good, but if you start on this now, you'll pay less on this in the future. And then when you do have a family, so there's all these cost benefit analysis. And then again, you make it all about them. So yeah, I love this stuff.
It's yeah. Do you find that kids get more? Are they getting more difficult now with age? Is this just something in my head that kids are, how's the way to I'm trying to be careful with how I word this now.
Be positive. Yes, I understand. You want to be positive in the way you frame it.
As it seems that kids are a little bit more interested in being on the phone at work, rather maybe sending a Snapchat or being on Instagram at work, rather than they really just want to get paid on Friday, rather than really being good at the job. Do you find that's a thing? I see quite a lot of it in my work. I see people, who work in, I work with garages, car garages, and I see, some young people who don't really care about the job in any way, shape, or form. It's just a means to make money, and it's like they don't really care about the job. Do you find this is like becoming a more widespread thing, or is it just something I see?
No, it's not just something you see, but what you see is something from a generational context.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in there's no generation that's worse or better or anything else. Every generation just changes based on the environment we're being grown up in.
Yeah.
And when I grew up, there was 3 channels on the television. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. I mean, there was nothing. And you figured it out. There was the United States in the 1970s when I was growing up. There was no money. My parents never owned a home. They still never owned a home. I mean, it was very rough. And so you went to work at a very young age to try to take care of yourself. My kids did not experience that whatsoever because I learned how to be an entrepreneur. I mean, even working inside the FBI, I had what's called outside employment authority. I mean, I've run my company. I was running it 8 years before I retired because I have been an entrepreneur my entire life trying to provide for myself because that was my generational type of experience. That being said, you're not going to undo thousands of years of evolution in a small span of technology. And so what every human being seeks and craves is exactly the same. And what they'll do under stress will still revert to the same. And I just use the example of my son, who, he heard about all my experiences at the Naval Academy, as a plebe, your first year and all the stress that I went through there. And his first year or two there, he says, "Dad, this was not what you said it was going to be. This is way easier. These people are moron." Whatever he's saying, he said, "This is not your experience that you had." And I said, "Yes, but that's okay. It's your experience. It's different." But every generation has their thing. And I'll tell you what, the stuff that they're going through right now, doing distance learning, because he's been home since March 9th. And he taught himself. He's a mechanical engineer. He taught himself mechanical engineering courses the rest of the semester. And right now he's at home studying double electrical engineering before he goes back and goes into quarantine for 2 weeks before he has to start training plebes. They are doing hardcore shit. Excuse my language. I mean, this is no joke. I mean, this generation is now had their moment of, all right. We had an expression when I was in the young officer in the Marine Corps. Because you can guarantee, when you're in any kind of situation in life that, whether it's combat or behind the scenes in training, life is going to throw you a lot of weird curveballs. And what are you going to do? And the expression was, what now, Lieutenant? You're a brand new second lieutenant. You got the commanding officer above you. You see something go squirrely sideways and someone does something weird or some new situation pops up. And as a second lieutenant, you're looking for someone to bail you out, and all they're doing is looking back at you, and they say, "What now, Lieutenant?" and that's what I think this generation is going through right now. Is all right. Here's what the situation is. What now? You're going to roll over and die, or you're going to step up and move forward. It's a choice. And so I agree with you. They haven't had to be pushed for a while because our generation was pushed, and so we wanted to make an easier life for ourselves, and by making an easier life for ourselves, our children have it easier. It's just a natural evolution, But when faced with it, they're going to have to shut up or put up. And I'm seeing it though. I'm definitely seeing it. It's so have heart. It's going.
I wonder how much of it is just people in general. It doesn't even necessarily have to be kids who are just doing a job that they hate. They just don't want to do the job that they're doing. It's just. I wonder how much of it's just that, which I'm sure happens.
Yeah, there are, and that's unfortunate. I'm not sure where I read it. I saw this great article a couple of days ago, and again, put your political feelings about these folks aside, but it was Howard Stern was interviewing Jerry Seinfeld, and on the Howard Stern show, and it was what I found really fascinating was Howard Stern, two very successful folks, multimillionaires. Very, very successful. And Howard Stern was talking about how, and again, I'm paraphrasing, I'm probably butchering it, for folks that have read it and seen it, but Howard Stern was talking about his success was because, he was diligent, he was hardworking, he leaned in, took discipline to do these things. And Jerry Seinfeld said, all right, I'm not going to take away from those aspects of it. He said, but here's something I'm going to add. You are as successful as you are, and I'm as successful as I am because we love. And, and Howard kind of gave him a quizzical look and says, what do you mean? He goes, well, when you love what you do, you have limitless energy. If you're doing something because you're trying to be disciplined, that's a limit. You will run out of energy. You will run out of the things. And so for those people that don't love what they do, they will hit a dead end because they will run out of energy. The challenge in life is to figure out what do you love and devote yourself to that and figure out how to make that prosperous for yourself. It's a great challenge, especially, not everyone, has that ability to do that, and there's a certain walk in life. And you got, here's the thing, you got to be broad with it, because I mean, even with myself, I'm trying to figure this out for myself. What do I love? Because, I'm running this company, and I got to tell you, 90% of the stuff I need to do, I hate. Marketing, sales, social network. I hate all this garbage. It's not me. What do I love? I love communicating like this. This is the part I love, and so I was really trying to hone in. It's like, what is my love? Well, my love is sharing, my passion for understanding how to communicate effectively. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. You can do it on a podcast. You can do it with online virtual stuff. There's a lot of ways. And so I'm making sure that I understand that core. And that's what I put out to others is, if you don't like what you do, I understand it because you're trying to make ends meet. But at the same time, identify those things in your life, as if you even got one or two, because if you can do that, that's amazing. And figure out, what is it about those things that you love? So say that someone likes a hobby, but they say, I can never make money at that hobby. I understand that, but what is it about that hobby that gives you that satisfaction? Is the ability, that the fact that you're helping someone else? Because a lot of people find a great value in helping others. So if it's helping others, well, you can monetize that in another area, maybe over here. So in other words, really zeroing in on exactly what gives you that inner joy. Because once you identify that, then you'll have that limitless energy, and then you can actually keep going without bounds.
Yeah, that's I'm quite lucky. So I, work for what was my family's business, Robin. It's now sort of mine. I'm very lucky that I enjoy it. It allows me to get up in the morning, maybe lift some weights, go for a run, go to jiu-jitsu, kick Ali's ass. I'm allowed. I get so much freedom. I like what I like to do what I do, and I get all the freedom to go run a marathon or do a triathlon or climb a mountain or whatever it is. And it's so much, and that make, when I speak to people and they're saying, it's Monday tomorrow, I don't want to go to work. And I think, why? Get a new job. Like, it's just exactly what you're saying. It must be so draining for somebody to hate what they do. They don't like it. They don't like their boss. They don't like, anybody in the office. They can't get to the gym, and
It is. I think the first thing that's important to do is, I do this a lot. I did it when I was doing recruiting operations. When you're trying to think in terms of recruiting a spy, people are always saying, well, what's their motivation? Everyone will always scream at you, oh, they're motivated by money. I go, nope. Money's just the thing to get them to something else. What actually everyone's motivated by is creating a safe, prosperous, and comfortable life for themselves and their families, how they define that. And so having people understand that, there's a lot of ways in which to create prosperity for yourself that doesn't necessarily center around the thing you think it needs to be for making money. Because money is just the thing to get you that sense of prosperity. There's resource. I love thinking in terms of life is an exchange of resources with others. And this time of COVID is a perfect example. I mean, all my in-person speaking completely dried up, which was my main source of resources for my post FBI life. Does that mean my life has stopped? No. But what's happened now is barter. You can't pay financially, so we actually work out barter programs where you'll promote me, you'll do advertising for me, you market this, you give me a great review on this, because and is that still as valuable? Sure. Because life is about resources and exchanging resources, so it's just understanding, what's the new thing and how do you do that. And so, to your point, I do feel bad that people feel they're locked into something because they have to do something. It's sad, and I'm not discounting it. I'm not diminishing that emotion. I've been there. Neither my parents ever went to college. Grew up extremely no money. Started working at a very young age because I had to if I ever wanted to have school clothes. So I get it. but you can do something about it.
You can,
Yeah,
and I think if you look at it as a means to an end, it sometimes becomes easier. Because I've been in situations where my kids were very young, like preschool age, and I just had to get a job because I needed to get money to come in, to pay bills, to get food on the table. And I did jobs that I didn't enjoy, and definitely weren't what I wanted to do. But I always had it as a, you know what, this is for the next 2 years. And in 2 years' time, we'll be in a bit better financial position, so I can then look for the next stage. And in the next stage, and I'm quite lucky now that I, like Chris is saying, I genuinely enjoy 98% of my job, which I think anyone's, like you're saying, Robin, you know, there's elements of it that whenever it is, there's always small elements you don't. But 98%, I don't have the Monday fear, like Chris was saying. I don't have that fear of sitting here on a Sunday night going, oh God, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to be sat at the desk. I genuinely don't have that. And I know that in a way, it sounds crazy to say, but I know that me and Chris are lucky to have that, because I know from speaking to friends that a lot of them don't have that.
You're right. And I'll still tell you, regardless of the job you're doing, it's never the job. And I was fortunate in the fact that I learned early on, don't follow the job, follow the people. Because I have worked for companies, you know, as a consultant that I would have never have thought of working for in a million years. One of them was an automotive company, and I would never have thought of being in the automotive industry in any way. But this company created such a good, healthy work environment. I would have gone there in a second. So the bottom line is follow healthy relationships, create them around you, and follow them. If you have the people that dread going to work are the ones that have unhealthy relationships at work, because you dread the people you're going to be around. I mean, if you like being around the people you're around, work is a joy, because again, flipping a switch or putting something on a conveyor belt, or, you know, selling a product, it's a thing. You know, and anyone can do a thing. It's the people you're with and the relationships you have. If they're healthy, you love seeing them. If they're unhealthy, you dread it. It really comes down to something that simple. And so that's what you make a choice about is, are you aiding the unhealthy relationship by bitching and moaning about it, or can you do something about it? And here's what you do about it. You seek the thoughts and opinions of others. You talk in terms of their priorities. You validate them, and you give them choices. It comes down to all right, here's your situation. What are you going to do about it? Own it, and you can do something about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we've said so many times, and not necessarily with work, but you know, just in your personal life, or, you know, at the gym, or whatever you're doing, you know, everything is so dependent on who you have around about you. So, you know, if you're going, you know, if you're in a gym or a CrossFit gym or anything, and the guys around about you are assholes, yeah, you just, I might not go tonight. But when you go in there, it's like, oh man, yeah, Robin's in, he's a cool guy. Yeah, we'll have some chat. You know, we'll talk about, you know, this or that, and it becomes so much fun.
That's why you go.
Yeah. That's exactly why. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but you have this, you know, like you're saying with negativity. So, you know, negativity is such a bad, it's so bad. And I don't even think people get stuck in these little ruts where they're surrounded by people going, oh, he's an asshole, or, you know, she's an asshole, you know, he did this, and, well, I don't like this president, I don't like this, and it's just constant.
It's exhausting.
It's so mentally exhausting.
Yeah.
You need to go, stop all this. Let's.
And that's why, so everyone's always looking for. So, you know, what are like 1 or 2 things I can do today, right now, all the time to stop that? And that's easy. Yeah. You seek the greatness in others. In other words, stop paying attention to what's screwed up with them, because I guarantee you, everyone's working on something. We're born perfect. The world messes us up pretty good for 19 years, and we spend the rest of our lives unscrewing that. And so find their greatness. And the second thing is identify their priorities and what's important to them, and how can you be a resource for them in terms of those priorities. In other words, figure out what their job in life is and how you're going to make their life easier. Because if you become the person that makes the life of others easier, everyone's going to want you in their life. And when they want you in your life and you start understanding what their resources are and you have priorities, that's where this exchange starts happening. That's where relationships are built. They're built because you understand what's important to each other. You unconditional with your offering of your resources to others, no expectation of reciprocity, you know, and that's where relationships are built. And that's why, you know, a couple guys like you can disagree on things, but you understand what each other's priorities are. You give each other unconditional resources for each other's success and prosperity. That's why when stupid little things of opinion show up, who the hell cares? It's fun poking at each other. But the bottom line is we're there. and that's what deep-rooted, healthy relationships are built on. And the more of those you have, you can weather any storm, guaranteed.
And I can also kick Ali's ass, so that's
makes it easier for him, eh? The annoying thing is I can't even disagree. That's the most annoying
I'm not
part
saying anything, but I see Ali sitting here, his sweatshirt, and I see Chris over here, he's looking jacked, man. You're screwed, Ali.
No, I know it. I've been heel hooked and armed by him many a time.
But Ali's a lot smarter, so that balances itself out.
I can tell. I'm not it's Chris, I can tell.
Oh man, I've just been roasted off an FBI agent.
Yeah, no roast. Observe human behavior.
Oh yeah,
it's funny.
Yeah,
it's
funny.
Talking about things like that. How much does, when you're talking about building the relationship and establishing things, how much part does bias play into it? In terms of if you're biased for or against, so someone that you like, you're automatically a little bit biased that when they do things, maybe not how they're meant to, you go, it's all right because I like them. Whereas even if they're doing pretty good and you don't like them, the behaviour that they're displaying, you're going to turn against it pretty quickly. And it's really difficult. I find it very difficult to overcome bias. I think most people do, because you have that. And I suppose it's part of the problem that we're seeing in the wider world just now as well.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, you're doing a great bridge from one of the topics in the book. It's a bias of liking, no doubt. So I think one of the toughest biases that we have in life is liking or disliking someone, because liking is a very subjective thing. Liking someone is based upon having common interests, backgrounds, commonalities, hobbies, and has nothing to do with actually predicting what they're going to do. So the first thing I do is so people think if I like someone, I can trust someone. But remember, liking someone just means that you have commonalities, and commonalities does not mean you can actually, be assured they're actually going to follow through on a project, follow through on a task, because that's actually, they're two totally separate things. And so I like to bifurcate and separate the fact that just because I like you doesn't mean I can actually trust you / predict what you're going to do. Because just because I like you and you don't fly a plane doesn't mean I can hand you the keys to the plane I fly and trust you to actually not kill me and my family. I love using these extremes because that's actually a skill set that is something totally assessment different. And so yeah, that liking bias is powerful, and if you disliking, it's just as powerful. And here's the example I love to give, because my daughter, my family is beautiful because everyone is on a different side of the political spectrum of things, and so my daughter does not like our President Trump, and so. I'm the first to say there is no doubt he is the most, and I don't do politics at all, so this is not political. He is the most divisive president we've ever had. And that's because he is the most well-known prior to running for presidency because of all his social stuff he was doing, and, The Apprentice and all that. And so you had millions of people assessing prior to him running for president whether they liked him or disliked him. And the same for Hillary Clinton, because she's been around so long. And so now think about this. If you like or dislike someone, if you like them, there's not one thing they can do that you're not going to agree with. And if you dislike them, there's not one thing they're going to do that you will agree with. And so my daughter she's like, Dad, I don't agree with that. And I said, okay, I understand. I said, so help me understand, Caitlin. I said, you do not like President Trump, correct? And she goes, yeah, I can't stand him. I said, okay. Is there anything he could do that you would agree with? And she goes, absolutely not. And I said, there you go. And so that liking and disliking bias is extremely powerful because it's very subjective. And that's why, when I wrote Sizing People Up, it's 6 signs of behavior prediction with all these behavioral observations underneath them. And behavioral observation is very subjective. But what I try to do is make it so much of it that when you take that much data, subjective data, it actually becomes more objective. And that's why I coined the phrase in there, how to think like an FBI behaviorist. And it happened because literally when I was writing this book with my writer Cam, him and I have worked together for years. He's a great writer, but he was never an FBI agent. And I remember in one section of the book, he had said, I wrote a section, and then he was editing it, making it sound all cool for Hollywood and publishing. And he said he came up with the phrase, I was sweating bullets. like during this 9/11 thing or something like that. And I remember calling him up. I said, Cam, I said, we got to get rid of that. He goes, what do you mean sweating bullets? I said, I have never sweat bullets. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you can't, because if you're sweating bullets, it means you're emotionally attached to an outcome. It means you're stressing it. I said, I actually never stressed anything. I was thinking cognitively of cause and effective behaviors. That's how you actually think, and cognitively think through situations so you don't get emotionally hijacked. Because anytime, I know I'm kind of going all over on you, but this is the bottom line for me, is relationships. And the only way you can cognitively make relationships good is not getting emotionally hijacked with negative emotions of stress, anxiety, resentment, discontentment, frustration, anger. All those emotions cloud your vision for seeing the healthy relationships, because every solution you're looking for to achieve whatever you're achieving is going to come through a relationship with someone else. And if you cloud your judgment with all these negative emotions, you're not seeing all these other potential solutions that are coming through all these other people, all these other relationships. And so that's why I said how to think like an FBI agent. It's really simple. Do your best not to get emotionally hijacked, because as an FBI guy, I never had the solutions. My solutions for protecting national security came through relationships with other people. And so that's how you honor that. And you do that by maintaining that great objectiveness and not getting that negative emotional hijacking.
Do you know that's interesting, because what I find at work when I'm training is we ask for, like a lot of things, you get feedback. And one of the common themes that come back is, oh, Ali's really patient. But if you ask my kids, they'll say, Dad snaps like that. And it's because I've always said I get paid to be patient at work.
Yeah.
And I'm not for whatever, like there's some people I've really liked that I've trained, but I've never been as emotionally involved as I am with my wife and kids. They know how to push the buttons. They know how to, they're kids.
And you give the greatest example ever. For years before I started giving labels and meanings to understanding these things, I always wondered, how come my confidential human sources, my people that are helping me with national security, how come they like me better than anyone else in my life? Well, it's because I was patient with them. Like you said, I sought their thoughts and opinions. I talked in terms of their priorities. I validated them, gave them choices, and I never judged them in any way. Meanwhile, everyone else in my life, I'm going to judge living hell out of you because I think you're a moron. And so what's really funny is my first book. So you have the Code of Trust, you have Sizing People Up. My first book was my self-published one. It's this one. And my wife holds this up to me about once a week. It says, it's not all about me. And so about once a week, she holds this up and says, hey, I got a good book for you to read, moron. So I totally get you. So outside my house, using my understanding and my seeing of the world through the matrix, I'm probably about 95 to 98% effective. I really I'm game on when I walk out that door, when I'm talking to others. And it's not an act. It's literally me using my manuals that I wrote for myself on how not to be a self-centered narcissistic moron, so I understand how to do it. But when you're at home, man, and your shields are down, stand by, because this mouth, it runneth over. I am an extroverted, narcissistic, self-centered, snarky guy from the Northeast, and my mouth just goes.
That's a great title for a book as well. What was it? Self-centered narcissistic. How not to be one. That's your next one.
Yeah, one of the interesting things to go back a little bit there, Rob, is one of the things that I find, and not to go political either, is our leader in Scotland. I am not a fan of in the slightest. So what I had to, exactly what you're saying about your daughter. So what I would find myself doing is just disagreeing with everything.
Right.
Just nope, don't like it. And then you have to sort. I think it happens as you get a little bit older. Anyway, you go, okay, do I really dislike what she's saying, or do I just dislike her? And then you kind of have to try and separate the things. And you go, okay, maybe I'm being ridiculous. This isn't actually bad. It's just I've put her on this shelf, and I just don't like her. I don't like anything about her. But in this case, she's actually not wrong. Do you know what I mean? So it's trying to be. Consider I'm not as smart as Ali. It's trying to be self-aware.
But you see how perfect that is, and because people ask me that all the time, how do I get better at this? And I said, the mere fact that you understand that you're not, That's the first step, because it's a journey, not a destination. I mean, I've never met anyone that is perfect at this, and I'm not even close either. But being self-aware enough to realize, all right, this is what I'm doing, and matter of fact, I'm thinking about doing an article or a small video on this. I'm calling it "No Emergency Takeoffs." And that is, I'm a pilot, and one of the things you learn as a pilot is there's no emergency takeoff. If something's not right, don't go, because you're going to create an emergency that's going to make you land. And so it's the same thing with your mouth. No emergency takeoffs with the mouth. If you're being hijacked, emotionally, if you got a bias and you just don't know what to say, you're trying to strategize, best thing to do is just shut up because no emergency takeoffs. It's better to not have any opinion sometimes than to offer one that here's a guarantee. If you take a side, and I'm not saying what you should take a side or not take a side, but I guarantee you, as soon as you do, half the world will line up against you. It's a guarantee. You look at some of the most famous altruistic human beings that have ever lived and walked on this planet, whether you're talking about Muhammad, whether you're talking about Jesus, whether you're talking about Gandhi, I don't care who you're talking about. All these people were assassinated, came at, killed, crucified, whatever it is, and these were the most and they're the best of us all, because if you take a side, someone will line up against you. It's just human nature.
It's interesting that you say about keeping your opinion to yourself sometimes, because I think we were talking about this just a couple of episodes ago. I think George Floyd had just been killed, and and one of the things we were saying to our friend was not because you see this video, which is obviously terrible, but everybody goes absolutely crazy and their hair's on fire, and you go, but we don't know what happened prior. You just see this clip.
Right.
So, it's trying not to react instantly, to go, okay, what happened here? And then, you find out what happened and he didn't actually do anything and they were right. But it's trying not to, react to the first thing that you see. It's just, people just, there's so many factors that you might not see in a situation.
Yep.
And so to take the time to go, okay, let's just step away for a second. Let's figure out what's going on. And then we could, it's, the same with when COVID first hit and everybody's coming up with these crazy ideas about what's going on. You go, we need to let the details kind of come out and then we can make an opinion. People were coming out with all these crazy, it's 5G, you go, oh my God, be quiet. Just, the details here,
it's going to be fascinating.
Details have to come out before you can make an opinion. Instead of just going, I seen that and, that's what it is. So, it's
I always look at it like this, so I deal with a lot with companies and law enforcement and stuff. And I always, start out by asking everyone and said, hey, who here has ever actually personally witnessed something that was actually ever reported in the news? And I get a lot of hands that go up. And I said, all right, how often was it completely accurate? And no one ever says it was. And I said, all right, so remember that when you're watching the news. What changed with the news and the news cycle, and it happened in the late 70s, early 80s when CNN, I remember when CNN was first invented and cable first came out. And this was the first time you went from, the nightly news that was on for about 30 minutes for me growing up, and there was no commercials. Because there's no commercials because the nightly news was boring and you couldn't sell ad space on it. It was a public service was to present the nightly news. So it didn't sell ad space for profit. And so what happened was CNN comes around and you need 24 hours news and someone has to pay for that. And you pay for that through ad space. And how do you get ad space? Well, you have to have viewers. How do you get viewers? You have to sensationalize and make things that are viewable, that are interesting. You have to create drama. And so therein lies the first steps towards, making things where you cover it with a bias, not saying it's accurate or inaccurate. You cover it with a bias and a slant because you're trying to sell and get ad space so you can actually keep people's jobs afloat and keep networks afloat. And I don't care if it's CNN, Fox, or anyone. It's how the world works. And unfortunately, that also means, you got to really, really take a slow assessment of information when it first gets released, because I guarantee you there's more there. I just guarantee it. I've never been part of anything in my life that was presented completely the first time I saw it.
We were talking about the bias, sorry, Chris, and it was actually an American that we were talking to, and he had said that he felt the BBC was really unbiased, which is really funny because over here we see the BBC is extremely biased on the same slant as a Fox or a CNN, because that's our experience of it. We see the 24/7 BBC rolling news and they just happen to be more biased towards the kind of the left side of things,
right,
rather than the right. But it's almost seen, probably historically, and as you were saying, maybe through the 80s and 90s, that the BBC were like the bastion of world press, to put a title on it. That it was a little bit above the gutter sniping and the sort of daily rags of the Fleet Street, the newspapers as they were in Britain. And the BBC was held up as something a little bit above it all. And over the last 10 years or so, there's been scandal upon scandal came out with the BBC, and their reporting of it. It's definitely changed over here as well, similar to what you were saying about Fox and CNN in the States.
It's funny. My granddad, he watches CNN America for some reason. Don't know why, because he lives in Scotland. He watches CNN America 24, however long he sleeps. He watches it for 18 hours a day.
Wow.
And all he tells me every day is what President Trump has done wrong. And I'm going,
right.
Okay, but yeah, okay. I'm not a fan. I'm not saying he's great, but you're watching this thing who clearly despise him.
Right.
There's a flip side to this as well. So you need to be aware that, and as we always say, the truth's somewhere in the middle.
Always.
Yeah.
And you can, I think the healthiest people are, if someone can actually list the strengths of each president, whatever side they were, as long as they've lived, that's someone who actually has an unbiased look at things. I look at, whether you look at Trump or Obama or the Bush, Clinton, I mean, each one of them had some amazing things they did. We witnessed amazing history, if nothing else, with the fact that we had, Obama as the first black president elected. That was amazing to be able to witness that in my lifetime. His communication style was different, and then when you look at, for me, I grew up under Reagan. So you had Reagan and Clinton, two of the greatest communicators we ever had. Very different politics in a lot of areas, but very similar in some other areas. And it just, when you can take that step back and you see the strength of the human being and just realize, all right, everyone's working on something. No one's perfect, I think the ability to see people's strengths and when they're doing something right, and also being able to say, all right, this is a bit messed up right here. It's also really good. I mean, there's things that Trump's doing that I think are really, really effective. At the same time, he needs to shut up.
I think, genuinely think, obviously we only get a little snippet of what's going on, but I think his biggest problem is that he says something that's not quite true, and then just keeps digging that hole for some reason. It's like he doesn't have a filter in any way, shape, or form, and just keeps going with it. And it's like he just keeps digging and digging.
Here's what's funny about him, though. So I did a thing with Brian Kilmeade on a radio show. And I said, to a lot of people on the left will say that he's so unpredictable. And it's actually, no, President Trump is actually one of the most predictable presidents we've ever had, because you know exactly what he's going to do all the time. If you say something negative, he's going to tweet about you. He's going to give you a nickname and berate you. And like you said, he's going to not relent. Watching him going after Mad Dog Jack Mattis right now, our former Secretary of Defense, it's dumbfounding, because here's a guy that, I was enamored with Mattis. I thought, what a great Secretary of Defense, what a great job. But as soon as Mattis went negative on Trump, man, he knew what was going to happen. He was
when Mattis was appointed, it was very much Trump was all for it, and as you say, the minute it changed, boom, gone.
But it's predictable. You know exactly what he's going to do. So there's a game theory for strategy called tit for tat, which is it's called Prisoner's Dilemma. And I don't know whether Trump does this intentionally or it's just or he does it thoughtfully. I kind of think it's intuitive as a CEO, as a company, that because again, he's just predictable, because he's literally a CEO of a company. He's running the country like a CEO does. And what makes him predictable is what game theory and tit for tat says is, if you poke me in the eye, I'm going to poke you back, and I'm going to poke you back twice as hard as you poked me. But the second you stop poking me in the eye, we're friends, and we can work together. and I'll stop poking you. And, if you look at how he was going at Marco Rubio, the senator, how he's going after Ted Cruz, and as soon as those two just shut up and became on his team, now they're best friends. He does the same thing with dealing with Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. He does exactly the same thing with every single individual in every single situation. He's game theory tit for tat. He doesn't hold grudges, but if you go at him, you're done. And you're going to be crushed until you relent. As once you relent, we're fine. And that's game theory tit for tat. And you don't have to like it, but you easily to understand it. And it's so predictable. He does exactly the same thing every time.
How do you see the race with Biden going?
Boy.
It's funny because that sigh sums up. I think we've said this before as well, Ali. And we just going, is that I listened to Tulsi Gabbard on a podcast before. He seems super smart, super intelligent, and very reasonable.
Did you say you had Tulsi Gabbard on a?
No, not yet, anyway. But no, I'd heard her on a podcast, and she seemed super smart. Super smart, and seemed like she was very intelligent. She'd been in the military, so she's got an understanding of that. And then they go with Joe Biden. You listen to him talking, and you think, genuinely, I wouldn't let this guy run me a bath. He just seems so stupid. It's like, how is this guy? It just seems crazy, absolutely crazy.
So, well, you know what you're going to get on both sides. You know what you're going to get if Trump's reelected. You're going to get more exactly what's going on. And if Biden's elected, I also know exactly what you're going to get. It's going to be run by committee. Our country will be run by a bunch of people. So if you just got to know who his allies are, which are the left, hardcore left in our country. And so if he's elected, that's exactly what's going to be running our country. It won't be him. It'll be by committee. Just because that's how, and it's not about him, being good or bad or indifferent or anything. It's just, he's being supported by a lot of organizational people inside of Washington, D.C. So I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Are you intrigued as a guy who's, into the behaviour analysis to see how the debate goes down between Trump and Biden? Because even as an outsider, that must be fascinating, because I always think of Trump as like a 1980s NWA wrestler.
Yeah.
Right. To get the crowd in, like, let me tell you what I'm gonna do, brother. Like, I don't know the crowd to get people with his mirrored sunglasses on and a handlebar mustache. Whoa, let me tell you, whereas you look at Biden and he's almost the exact opposite. He's almost undynamic, and you just think, is the challenge? He says, is it going to be too well managed for it to go to that level?
I really, I love human beings immensely, and I fear for, I hope there is a debate, because I think it's important for people to see, have good choices and understand what those choices are. And Biden on stage will be very interesting. I have people in my life, I think most of us had as well, that have reached that point in life that they're cognating and thinking and communicating in a similar way, and they tend to go off the rails a little quicker, a little more inflammatory. I don't know. I hope so. My only hope is that nothing humiliates anyone, because that'd be sad. But I fear that if a debate does happen, I fear that's got a higher probability of probably happening, because, he's at a point in his life, that he is, Trump is who he is. He's not diminishing, who he is. You know exactly what to predict from him. He's going to come at you. He's going to poke at you. He's going to call you names. He's going to poke at your son. He's going to poke at your relationships with China and with Ukraine. And I think it's going to be hard for Biden to maintain his emotional stability when faced with those things. I think it's not just Biden. I think it's a challenge for anyone. That's why Trump did what he did in the primaries in his first time around. He has an ability to really get under your skin, and I think that's what he's going to do the same thing here.
Yeah, I think as well, it's because he doesn't do that politics thing, or certainly from looking at, again, thinking more British, but, you know, if you say something, you're expecting to come back with some form of a reasonable argument, and someone just turns around and goes, like, you know, Chris, you're just an idiot. Right. And then, you know, what have I got to, you know?
He's not polite. It
doesn't give you something to come back against or to counter if you're expecting, here's my point A, okay, I'm going to counter with point B. Whereas when he turns around and goes, you're a moron, you're an idiot.
And I think the interesting thing that I'm curious about this time around too is, you know, when he ran last time, you know, he did not have the, you know, he had his CEO brash, you know, way of communicating, but what he didn't have was world experience as a world leader. Now he does, and actually, you know, one thing that, you know, again, you give credit and where credit's due and credit where it's not due. You know, the dude's involved. He actually understands and he knows what's going on everywhere. I think he follows, you know, what's going on very closely, whether it has to do with COVID, whether it has to do with, you know, dealing with China, Russia. I mean, he is a lot smarter about what's going on than he was the day he took his presidency. And Biden's been out of that realm for quite a while. So I think getting a briefing from a staff like Biden's getting right now compared to actually living it, and that's for any standing president. I mean, look at Obama. I mean, you know, he was very, very well informed about what's going on. You know, it gives them an immense step up when on a debate stage, because you can actually talk very intelligently because you live it every day and the other person's not. So I think that's also a difference this time around as well. But, you know, I think this is also going to be, just like every election is, it's going to be determined by liking and disliking. And the most important thing is the number one poll that comes out every time. It's been the biggest predictor is that economic one. If our economy is on recovery and doing very well, that's a tough road for Biden to overcome. A very tough road.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, the similarities with Boris over here with Trump.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Such a, you know, kind of a buffoon in a way. Boris, the way it's like, you know, it's like nothing sticks to him.
Right.
But again, you know,
it makes you curious. How does that work?
It's man, it's again, you know, when they had Corbyn running against him, you're just thinking, Corbyn does not win this race. You know, and the guy that has now replaced him, Keir Starmer.
So Keir Starmer.
You already look at his background now and his involvement in the Jimmy Savile thing. You just go, how is this guy? The man, this is not the man to beat.
Right.
Boris Johnson. You know, he was involved in the early investigation into Jimmy Savile. You know, investigating the BBC, and I think he was the guy behind, you know, the team, and he said, "Yep, I don't see anything wrong here." And then, you know, now he's the leader of opposition. You go, okay, this is a bit, you know, he's doesn't have a personality, and Boris, kind of like Trump, nothing sticks to him.
Yeah,
everything bounces off him, and he just marches on. And you think, you know, I don't, you know, it's hilarious. Yeah. It's hilarious in the sense that it's very serious, but it's also quite funny.
Right.
Yeah. It's like they're the perfect leaders for the social media era, aren't they? Where it's that 140 character soundbite.
Yeah.
It just fits them. It seems to fit them both perfectly. You know, if you mentioned earlier Reagan, and obviously at the same time in Britain, and again, I was not a fan of her in any way, shape, or form, but we had Margaret Thatcher.
Right.
And if you think now, you know, comparing Trump to Reagan and comparing Johnson to Thatcher, although they're in the same parties, and, you know, theoretically under the same biases or whatever you want to put alongside, you know, the Republican and the Tories over here, they're completely different in every way, shape, or form.
And they would be, because the times are very different.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, the press is different, the media is different, you know, social stuff is different, what's going on in the world is different, you know, but it still keeps coming back for me, though, is, you know, what do general human beings, what are they seeking and craving, what resources they have for it? And that's why, you know, if every time, you know, people start worrying about, you know, the state of the world, you know, whether it's COVID or whether it's protests or anything like that, you just look at history. You know, we went through a civil war here and we survived that. You know, we went through the civil rights movement in the 60s here, and we survived that. You know, we went through the Spanish flu, and we survived that. You know, we will survive, and things will move on. And because, again, and whether, groups and organizations are being funded and backed by anarchists or not, you know what? Most people, a huge majority of people, don't want that. Yeah. So what's really great, in most of the countries in the world is that, good people don't want that kind of lifestyle. And as you get these little flare-ups of insurrection and unjustness, as long as you're in a country that still has the ability to exercise that freedom, these things will be stomped down pretty fast. It take a few days. And again, I think what's going on in the United States, whether it was, police brutality, or it would have been something else. You lock people up for 3 months, and they were looking for an excuse to just get out and do something.
Perfect storm.
It really was.
Storm. Yeah.
And what a tragedy.
It's a terrible thing. There's like I was saying. So I was saying before is, I try to not to react to these videos anymore or anything directly. You wait for some information, but you see the video for all angles. You go, well, did he shoot at the cops? Or what? You see the video and you go, no, they killed him for nothing.
Oh, that's horrible.
There's no, they killed him for no reason. So,
always the best thing to always look at is, after you wait a couple of days, is to kind of see what other people in the same profession or how they're reacting. So when you actually start seeing other law enforcement reacting negatively and saying that it's bad, that means, all right, it's pretty accurate. That this guy was unjust. He was a bully cop for some reason, and it went sideways. And I mean, I just learned today that one of the other 3 cops that are now being charged, one of them was like brand new on the force, I think like a couple days. So there's a young guy that was just there, didn't know, just kind of following the lead of his seniors, and his life just got ruined as well. I mean, it's just, man, anytime something goes sideways in life, it impacts so many lives, and it's so horrible and horrendous. But and I see lots of I always see positive things though. Like my community here in Virginia, our law enforcement is really, really good and really, really close to people. And so we've had lots of protests downtown, close to where I live here. And the first day or two, they got out of hand a little bit, and had some guy smashed a window, a car of a family, and the other protesters got on them for it, and the cops did too. And then the next day, the chief of police was, said, hey, we are actually here for your protection. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to march with you. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. So it's actually, in most places, and this is what the news doesn't cover, and actually, believe it or not, in most places in the United States right now, the cops are marching with the people, being part of them, communicating with them, being part of the community with them, and saying, and that's what they're looking for, and so but the majority of things are that way, but the news cycle likes picking up on the 1 or 2 that are going nuts.
Good news doesn't sell, so
it doesn't.
What one of the most important things, we should all remember is, if you see all these bad, people doing terrible things on the news, we always have to remember that there's at least as many good people.
Many more.
Yeah. You've always got to remember, for every bad person, there's at least one equally good person, and that's that's quite a pleasant thing to
live it in the FBI. I mean, the FBI has been raked over the coals, with our executives we had, in the last bunch of years. And yet, and I do admire and appreciate, when the people in the press, at least report it, saying this does not represent all the people in the FBI. It does not represent the guys like me that, were on the street actually still doing and abiding by the law and the Constitution every day. So, because, there's, people will do stupid things in every walk of life. And, you don't hold institutions, ransom for the 1 or 2 morons that do wrong things. There's a lot of really good, and that's the thing to always remember. There's a lot of really, really good people in the world trying to do the right thing all the time.
Absolutely. So, Anyway, I've had enough of this political talk. It gets dark.
Yeah, me too.
It
I've
gets
never
depressing.
talked about this as much either. So
It
you
gets,
got a lot out. Good job.
It gets depressing. It gets depressing. So, what hills do you have? Many mountains close to you for hiking?
Yeah. I mean, I live pretty much at sea level here. I'm about 85 feet on towards the coast of Virginia, but we got the Shenandoah Valley, and we got decent mountains. I got hills around me. You kind of point you out my back window a little bit there. So I got my lighting system, so you can't see through that. But that's my pool in the back. It's nice. I got a nice little neighborhood here. Virginia's a very great place to live. Yeah, we do the hiking, and so we go camping a lot. We just came back this week, but our camping is not the type of hardcore camping. We do the glamping. I have a nice big travel trailer my wife and I take, and we go soft. So the campgrounds finally opened up here in the United States and most of the places because of COVID. So that's nice.
Do you have any animals to attack you? This is one of the things I like about Scotland. There's nothing that kills you.
Just the midgets.
There probably are. Virginia, we got some snakes that aren't so happy and friendly, but you generally don't see them anywhere. They scare the living heck out of me. I'm not a snake guy.
Yeah, no, I'm terrified of snakes as well.
Yeah.
Just talking about it makes me
spiders, snakes.
The island I'm originally from, over on the west coast of Scotland, has a native population of vipers, which are in the viper family related to rattlesnakes. And they look almost identical to a rattlesnake. They've got like the heat pits in the nose because they're from that family. Wow. And they are venomous. And a few years ago, probably about 15 years ago now, just because we're talking camping, there's a big campground in a place called Glen Rosa. And obviously in the summer season, it's absolutely hoaching with tourists. Hoaching just means full. Sorry, going Scottish there.
Right. Going Scottish.
I did
hoaching.
Hoaching. Absolute hoaching with tourists. I realised as I said that. So it was really full of tourists, Robin. And they'd seen that in the summertime they come out and bask. They sit up on the rocks. The snakes, not the tourists. And this English guy came along and he'd seen the snakes and had picked them up for a photo, and then got bit by them, and obviously had to get rushed to hospital for like anti-venom and everything. And he was quoted in the paper as saying, "I don't think anything in Scotland was dangerous." He literally just picked up like two rattlesnakes, essentially. Like, hey, get a photo, quick, take a photo. And obviously they bit his arm, bit his face, bit his neck. And then obviously got rushed away, and everyone, and it was on the paper like, "Oh, there's actual like," and we're like, yeah. There's the, there's
wow.
that.
Actually, I don't generally judge others, but I kind of term him as a moron.
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrible.
Right there.
Yeah.
Oh, that's horrible.
I'm hopefully going to go and do so in Scotland, Munro's are our mountains, anything over 1,000 meters. So we've been locked down since March. So hopefully I'll get to go and I'll check the weather and maybe go climb a little mountain tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. Get up there for
nice.
Before anybody else.
Nice. So and I found this pretty interesting. Is I've done a couple podcasts with other people around the world. Because it's like my book was released in Poland, so I've been doing a lot of interviews with Poland and stuff. What I found has been very unifying during this entire thing is we're all locked down together. We've all of us experienced this new norm of, all right, we got to learn how to live life virtually. And as an extrovert that thrives on human interaction, this has been an interesting time for me. And so it's been I love looking at the positive sides of things. And
yeah, man.
I see, to your point earlier, Chris, I see this generation having its defining moment, during this, the amount of self-discipline I think it takes someone that's young, like my kids, to self-study and get through college or even high school right now, at home in that kind of environment. I couldn't do it. I would quit. I mean, just like, you gotta be kidding me. I can't do that. My literally, because they're teaching themselves everything, and that's crazy. That's amazing.
It's also a very, to be a teenager now, if you think about all these social media things and all these, there's more attention on them now. It must be real difficult to be, a teenager or a young adult now. There just seems to be way more focus on, social media and appearances and all these things. It's a lot of pressure for a young person.
And it's fascinating too, because it's not just the social media aspect, but how to run your life virtually. My son is getting orders, and he's in nonstop communication with his chain of command. They're doing everything online. I have no idea what's going on. It's all on. He's living off his cell phone. From all his commands at the Naval Academy. Setting things up, getting back there, restructuring. I mean, I'm dumbfounded by the amount that they're able to do, and that our young generation is able to adapt to pretty stinking rapidly. It's actually kind of I couldn't believe how fast and easy it was for both my kids to actually transition to learning online. That blew my mind. That literally blew my mind. It literally took them about a week to two because my daughter was at George Mason University, my son's at the Naval Academy, and I know all the universities across the world did exactly the same thing. And for this generation to be able to set up and move online that fast, I was like, holy cow. That blew my mind.
Now, do you insist to the kids? Do you insist that they have to have some time off the phone? Do you say, you have to put that away sometime and just go for a hike or go play basketball? Do you insist on doing that?
When they were wee and younger, I could. My daughter does not live at home anymore, and my son, he's 20. He's going to do what he wants to do, but because he's in the military, he's got to maintain his athleticism anyway. So, but here's what I was really very proud of him for. It's like when this whole thing happened and we all went in lockdown, he was kind of oblivious to what the rules are. And I remember he was about to hop in his car and go visit some friends at the beginning of this. And I go, Kevin, you're not going anywhere. And he goes, well, why not? And he goes, because we're in freaking quarantine. He goes, what? And he goes, and he was really good. He goes, just tell me what the rules are. And we told him, I said, here's what the rules are. And he goes, okay, I'm good. And he was just that compliant. I just couldn't believe it. And he's been nowhere, that poor guy.
Just in full on lockdown.
Yeah, but it's
been crazy. And it's impacted everyone. It's not just it's not a Scottish thing. It's not a British thing. It's not just an American thing. It's
all been through it. Yeah, I mean, I've done podcasts in South Africa, to Poland, to you all. I mean, and everyone is exactly the same. It does bring you together, I think, because anytime you have shared suffering with someone, it's a bonding moment. And I think, again, you put the government and politics aside. Human beings as a race right now, that we've all been through this together. That's a bonding thing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I joked when it all first was kind of lockdown first started in Scotland and everything was getting very tense. I joked that we're living through a future 6-part Netflix documentary. In like 10 years, there'll be a 6-part documentary on Netflix talking about how we survived lockdown.
Yeah.
So the thing I joked about was the fact, so my daughter is now a nurse, and her specialty is labor and delivery, and she just guaranteed herself a job for 9 months at least.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. That is true.
A very, very big spike. Wow.
Yeah.
What do you make of the Chinese? If you look at their numbers and stuff for COVID, do you look at those numbers and knowing some stuff about intelligence, or any of this stuff? Do you look at those numbers and go,
So, China is all about China's all about China, is the best way to put it. China, you will do anything to promote and support China. I got a very good friend, a retired CIA case officer, Dan Hoffman's his name. We partnered together on an article on China. And, we reference, Reagan's great phrase, trust but verify. We need to be and are partnered with China on many things, economically, but at the same time, though, China will always act in their own best interest according to what they think that is. And I think COVID is definitely a huge part of that. And so, I think intelligence organizations really need to do a much deeper dive with them, with the best capabilities they have, to figure out truth, because we definitely did not have transparency and truth with what was going on with them, no doubt.
Yeah. Seems that way, huh?
Yeah, and it definitely, the good thing is that they saw, still all the evidence is that it was not manufactured. But intentional or unintentional release and all that, it's when you look at the impact, it makes you question, had such a massive worldwide impact on economics, and it's I'll tell you what, this is one for the history books. I mean, to live through this and kind of see the impact, it's an experience.
And like I was saying earlier, everybody was reacting instantly about all these wild conspiracy theories. Until we're a year, 5 years, 10 years down the line, we won't really know what went on, why went on, what happened. It takes a long time for all the cards to be shown.
That's why I'm a big believer in, don't try to look at the whole world, just, keep within your sphere of influence of the people in your lives. I got wrapped up into trying to save the world after 9/11, and it creates a very crazy mindset of, not feeling like you're doing enough every day to do something better. And you get really overworked over everything, PTSD, all that. And so as soon as you start realizing that, all you can do is control your little sphere of influence around you, affect that the best you can, create those relationships, and let the rest fall. It's good. Fall into place, not fall around you, just fall into place.
Fall into place. It's very, very stoic philosophy that, by this, sort of control the controllables, and the uncontrollables you just have to let.
Funny you mention that. So yeah, I am definitely, I coined that phrase in the book. It's called stempathy. It's a combination of a stoicism, a very cause and effect of human behavior, which I love because it keeps a very calm brain and calm mind. It keeps very rational thought going. But at the same time, though, in order to interact very productively with other human beings, you need massive empathy, understanding how they see the world through their perspective. And so that's what my whole process is. It's stempathy. It's a combination of the stoicism, a cause and effect, but understanding human beings with great compassion. But also, part of that is the objectivity of being a stoic is not getting emotionally hijacked by someone else's choices. Understanding that those are their choices, and because if you start riding their emotional roller coaster with them, you'll do no good for them because you're on their ride and not your own.
Yeah, I love that. I love that combination of the thought of stoicism with empathy. That's probably if you could get anything close to an ideal, is certainly heading towards that, isn't it? Because if you're too stoic, people I would imagine if you're at the extreme end of it, you're going to come across as cold and aloof, and as you've been sort of referring to throughout, Robin, with the 4 stages, you're not really going to build that because you've got too many. Right. You're not getting involved in anything, so you can't build the relationships. Whereas if you're too empathetic, you start reacting, and you, as you said, you worry about fixing everything, and you just can't. Right. And you burn out, you fall down. I like that. I do like
we only have a very short window of time on this earth. There's only so much you can. There's only so much you can do.
That's why I do love trying to combine them together, trying to keep rational, so you can be a resource for others at the same time, though understanding them at that deep level. To me, it's everything, because that's what creates relationships, and relationships are the bedrock for everything in life.
Absolutely.
Cool. How we doing for time, Ali?
We have done over 100 minutes.
I'm about toasted, man.
We're getting that point. I think that was a good point to end on as well, though.
Yeah,
it was
definitely.
Just before we wrap up, we always go, if people are looking for you on social media, want to know more about your getting contact, how will they find you, Robin?
Sure, absolutely. The best place to go is my website, which is peopleformula.com, all one word, peopleformula.com. I call it the online campus. I have online courses. I got podcasts. As soon as you guys come out with this one, I'll add you all to my podcast list on there. You got links to my videos on YouTube, and by all means, you can reach directly out to me. Believe it or not, I'm one of the most responsive people that you can get to. As long as you don't get buried in my email, I'll email you back. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there, Twitter. But basically, all I put out on social media is basically rebroadcasting podcasts and other things I do like this. So by all means, reach out. Cool. And I love scaling up. You can have all the free stuff like the podcast, but please, by all means, pay for my online courses, and I'll be very grateful.
Definitely. As I say, your 2 books, I'm reading through, Signing People Up, Code of Trust on the list. So it's been interesting to speak to the actual source.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm on the other side, but I love the idea of reading books I just can't get my brain to work to read books, but I love watching documentaries. I could watch documentaries
So all my
night.
books are read by me. So if you want Death by Robin, you can get the audiobook, and it is by me. So there you go.
I will do that. I will do that, and I will listen to it when I'm driving about my lorry. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, Robin. It's been super interesting for us, super cool for us. If we are still going in 6 months or a year's time, we might ask you to if you want to jump back on and talk more about your hobbies.
Guys, I will always come on with you all. You reach out anytime. I totally enjoyed chatting with you, and we talked about more about stuff I've never talked with anyone before either. I mean, and you got me talking non-political politics. So we'll end it with also understanding that I do not favor one side or the other, because as soon as you take a side, half the world will line up against you. I'm all about just understanding what you're witnessing. So
just sending out virtual hugs.
Yeah, virtual hugs. There you go. Virtual hugs for everyone. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Rob. I'll stop the recording now, but absolutely brilliant. Episode 19 done and dusted. Thanks very much, Robin Dreeke.
All right,